7 bullets and she's still breathing and fix that. The insurgent commander did not wait for an answer. He grabbed his own weapon, walked to where she lay face down in the dirt and fired twice more into her back. Point blank. She did not scream. She could not. He grabbed her by the collar, flipped her over like a piece of garbage, and stared down at her face, bloodied, barely moving, still alive. That made him angrier. He pressed his boot against her chest, leaned his full weight down, and held it there. Then he stepped off, spat, and turned away. Let her bleed out. I want her to feel every second of it. If this story moves you the way it moved me, please subscribe to this channel right now and follow Sloan's story all the way to the end. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let us go back to the beginning. The smoke had not cleared yet when Senior Chief Marcus Garrett stepped through what used to be a doorway. It was not really a doorway anymore. It was a gap in a collapsed wall, jagged concrete hanging overhead like broken teeth, the whole structure groaning under its own destroyed weight. Garrett moved through it without slowing down. 22 years of this had trained his body to keep moving, even when his mind was still catching up with what his eyes were seeing. Behind him, Petty Officer Second Class Danny Kowalski exhaled hard through his nose. Tell me that's not what I think it is. Garrett did not answer right away. He crouched low, his boots crunching over shattered masonry, his eyes scanning the ground in a slow, deliberate sweep. The airstrike had done exactly what it was supposed to do. The compound was rubble. Whatever had been standing here 40 minutes ago was now a flat, smoking field of broken things. And then he saw it. A hand. A woman's hand, pale against the gray dust fingers, slightly curled the way a hand looks when the body has stopped fighting but has not yet let go of the world entirely. Contact, Garrett said, his voice flat and quiet. Survivor, left quadrant. Kowalski was already moving. The rest of the four-man team fanned out, automatically, weapons up, covering the perimeter without being told. This was the kind of unit that did not need a lot of words. Garrett had built them that way deliberately. When you needed words to function, you were already behind. Garrett reached the hand first. He cleared the rubble around it with careful, rapid movements, throwing chunks of concrete to his left, peeling back a collapsed beam with both arms, the weight of it burning through his shoulders. And then he saw her face. He had seen a lot of faces in a lot of bad moments. He was not a man who shocked easily. But something about this particular face stopped him cold for exactly 2 seconds, which was longer than he usually allowed himself. She was young, maybe late 20s. She was wearing a Navy corpsman's uniform, or what was left of it. Her body armor had taken at least 3 rounds that he could see the plates cracked and displaced. Her left arm was pinned under a section of collapsed ceiling. Her right leg was bent at an angle that made Kowalski look away. And she had been shot. Not once, not twice. Garrett counted 7 entry wounds in the first 15 seconds, which meant there were likely more he was not seeing yet. She's gone, said the youngest member of the team, Petty Officer 3rd Class Travis Webb, from 3 feet away. Webb was 24 years old and had been on exactly 4 combat deployments, which in this unit made him the new guy by about a decade. She is not gone, Garrett said. Chief, look at her. Nobody survives. Put 2 fingers on her neck, Webb. Right now. Do it. Webb hesitated half a second, then knelt and pressed his fingers to the side of her throat. The silence that followed lasted long enough that Kowalski started to say something. Then Webb looked up, and his expression was completely different from the one he had been wearing a moment before. I've got a pulse, Webb said. His voice was different too. Quieter. Almost reverent. It's weak, but Chief, I've got a pulse. Garrett was already on his radio. Actual, this is Garrett. We have a survivor at grid Kilo 7. Female Navy medical personnel. Multiple GSW severe trauma. We need a medevac on standby, and we need it now. How copy? The radio crackled back. Copy that, Garrett. Medevac is 22 minutes out. What's her status? Garrett looked at the woman on the ground. Her chest was barely moving. Her lips were slightly parted, and there was a thin line of blood tracing from the corner of her mouth down her jaw. Her eyes were closed, but her eyelids flickered once while he was looking at her like something inside her was still trying to fight its way back to the surface. Critical, Garrett said into the radio. We are going to keep her alive until that bird gets here. Garrett out. He clipped the radio to his vest and turned to his team. Kowalski, start an IV. Webb, you're on airway. Dominguez, you cover us. Nobody leaves this position until she's on that helicopter. Chief, Kowalski was pulling his medical kit as he spoke, but his voice had a careful edge to it. 7 bullets. Even if we stabilize her. 7 bullets and she is still breathing, Garrett said. That means she is not done. So we are not done. Move. They moved. What happened in the next 22 minutes was not graceful. It was not clean. It was 4 men working in the rubble of a bombed-out compound in the dark, with enemy activity still possible in every direction, trying to keep one woman alive against odds that any rational person would have already written off. Kowalski got the IV in on the second try. his hands completely steady despite the ground beneath him still faintly trembling from secondary explosions somewhere to the east. Webb cleared her airway and positioned her head with a kind of precision that most people would not expect from a 24-year-old who had been calling her dead 2 minutes earlier. Garrett worked on the wounds himself, packing the worst of them with gauze, applying pressure in sequence, talking to her the whole time in a low, steady voice. "Stay with me," he said, not as a request, as a command. "You hear me? Stay with me. You have fought too hard to check out now. Whatever got you to this moment, whatever you did to survive long enough for us to find you, you keep doing it. You do not stop." She did not respond. She did not open her eyes. But her pulse did not stop either. Faint and ragged and frustratingly inconsistent, but there. Still there. It was Kowalski who found her ID badge clipped to the inside of what was left of her body armor. He read the name out loud without really meaning to. Reeves, Petty Officer Sloan Reeves. The name landed differently than just a name. It always did when you knew someone was still alive to carry it. "Sloan Reeves," Garrett repeated quietly, almost to himself. Then louder directly to her, "Sloan, my name is Garrett. We are going to get you home. Do you understand me? We are getting you home." Somewhere to the north, a burst of automatic weapons fire lit up the night. Dominguez tightened his grip on his rifle and shifted to cover that direction without a word. Webb looked up from where he was monitoring her breathing. "How much longer on that medevac?" Garrett checked his watch. 14 minutes. "She's losing blood faster than we can compensate for." "I know. Chief, I'm serious. If she—" "I know, Webb." Garrett's voice was not harsh, but it was firm in a way that cut through the noise. "And she knows it too, even if she can't tell us. So we give her the 14 minutes. All of it. Every second. That's the job." Webb pressed his lips together and nodded. The next 14 minutes were the longest of Webb's career. He told Kowalski that later, sitting in a forward operating base with a cup of terrible coffee going cold in his hands, and Kowalski just nodded because it had been the longest 14 minutes of his career too, and he had been doing this for 9 years. The helicopter came in low and fast, and for a moment the wind from the rotors blew the smoke and dust into their faces so thick that Garrett could barely see. But he kept his hand on Sloan Reeves' shoulder the whole time, kept talking to her, kept telling her she was going to make it. And when the flight medics jumped out and took over from them, he stood back and let them work and watched her being lifted onto the stretcher with an expression on his face that nobody on his team could quite read. Not grief, not relief, something in between. The particular emotion of a man who has done everything in his power and is now in the hands of factors entirely beyond his control. Webb came to stand beside him as the helicopter lifted off. "You think she'll make it?" Garrett watched the helicopter until it disappeared into the dark. "She was still breathing when they took her," he said finally. "That's more than anyone expected." "Yeah." Webb was quiet for a moment. "Who is she? I mean, what was a Navy medic doing out here? This wasn't a joint operation." Garrett shook his head slowly. "That is a very good question, and once she wakes up, if she wakes up, I am going to be very interested in the answer." What none of them knew yet, standing in that rubble in the dark, was that Sloan Reeves' story had started long before the night they found her, long before the 7 bullets, long before Afghanistan. It had started in a small house in a small town in western Georgia, where a little girl with her father's eyes used to fall asleep to the sound of him cleaning his rifle in the next room. Her father's name was Dale Reeves. Most people in Meridian County, Georgia knew the name. Not because Dale Reeves was famous, not in any way that would get you written up in a magazine or recognized on the street, but in a certain specific world, the world of competitive long-range shooting, the world of men who spoke in yards and windage and elevation corrections, who could tell you what a round would do at 1,200 meters with the calm certainty of a man discussing the weather. In that world, Dale Reeves was something close to legendary. He had been a Marine Scout sniper in his first life before Sloan was born, before he married her mother, and bought the house with the 3 oak trees in the front yard and the long, flat field out back. He had done things in that first life that he did not talk about. The awards in the box under the bed spoke for themselves, not that he ever took them out. What Dale Reeves did talk about endlessly and with a kind of reverence that Sloan recognized even as a very small child was the craft, the patience of it, the discipline, the math of it, the physics, the way the good shooter was really just someone who had learned to account for everything. Wind elevation, heartbeat, breath, the weight of the moment, and then let go. He taught Sloan to shoot when she was 8 years old. Not because he wanted her to be a killer. He would have been horrified by that idea. He taught her because he believed with the complete certainty of a man who had seen what happened when people could not protect themselves, that every person deserved to know how to stand their ground. And because Sloan had her mother's stubbornness in his own eye, which meant she was going to be extraordinary at it, whether she was taught properly or not, and he would rather it be him. She was hitting targets at 500 yards by the time she was 12. By 15, she had qualified for a national youth shooting competition, placed third in her division, and come home with a trophy she was genuinely proud of, and an offer from a collegiate shooting coach in Tennessee that her parents spent 3 weeks debating at the dinner table. Her mother, Margaret Reeves Maggie, to everyone except strangers, and the IRS had always held a complicated position on the whole thing. She understood it. She respected it. She trusted Dale completely. But she also had a quiet, persistent fear that lived somewhere behind her eyes that she could never fully explain even to herself. It was the fear of a woman who had spent years loving a man who carried wounds that he could not name and who knew, in the wordless way that long marriages generate their own language, that the rifle meant something to Dale that was not entirely about sport. The night before the Tennessee coach called to follow up, Maggie sat on the edge of Sloane's bed and took her daughter's hands in hers. Sloane was 16 by then, long-legged and sharp-eyed, and already carrying herself with a quiet self-possession that made strangers assume she was older. "You know I am not going to tell you not to shoot," Maggie said. "That ship has sailed, and honestly, baby, you are too good at it for me to pretend I would want to stop you if I could." Sloane looked at her mother, but I need you to promise me something, and I need you to mean it when you say it." "Mom." "Sloane." Maggie's voice was gentle but absolutely serious. "I have watched your father live with what he did in the Marines for 30 years. He does not talk about it, but I see it. It lives in him like a splinter that went too deep to pull out. I am not saying it was wrong what he did. I am saying it costs. It costs in ways nobody tells you about when they hand you the rifle and the mission and the uniform." Sloane was quiet. She had always known this about her father without having the words for it. She had seen it in the way he sometimes went very still at the dinner table, his fork halfway to his mouth, his eyes focused on something that was not in the room. She had seen it in the dreams he did not think anyone could hear. "I know, Mom. So promise me," Maggie said. "Whatever you do with your life, and I believe it is going to be something extraordinary, I genuinely do promise me that you will not use that gift to take a life. Promise me that the rifle is for everything else, for sport, for safety, for whatever you need it for, but not for that." Sloane looked at her mother's face for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I promise," she said, and she meant it completely. She meant it with every part of herself that she was able to access in that moment. She was 16 years old, and she had never been in a situation where a promise like that would be tested, and she did not yet know the full weight of what she was agreeing to. But she meant it. She joined the Navy at 21 after 3 years of pre-med at the University of Georgia, and a growing conviction that the thing she was actually called to do was medicine. The shooting stayed with her. She qualified at the top of every marksmanship course she was put through, and the instructors kept noting it in her file with a kind of restrained enthusiasm, the way you note something extraordinary when you are trying not to make the person self-conscious about it. But Sloane consistently redirected those conversations. She was here for medicine. She was here to save lives. She was not here for the rifle. She became a Fleet Marine Force corpsman at 24, which meant she operated with Marine and Special Operations units in environments that would have made the version of herself who made that promise to her mother in her childhood bedroom deeply uncomfortable. She was good at the medicine the way she was good at the shooting. Not just technically proficient, but genuinely gifted, with a particular calm that some people are born with and some people develop through controlled exposure to chaos. The calm that allows you to make correct decisions while everything around you is on fire. She was assigned to a Joint Special Operations Task Force at 27. The assignment was supposed to be support and advisory. She was supposed to stay back from the direct action. She was supposed to be the person who patched people up after the hard part was over. Supposed to. She had been in Afghanistan for 6 weeks when the mission changed. It was not a dramatic change the way mission changes happen in movies with someone slamming a folder on a table and raising their voice. It was the quiet, creeping kind of change, the kind where each individual step seems small and reasonable, and the next logical thing to do, and you do not realize how far you have walked from where you started until you turn around and cannot see the beginning anymore. The team she was embedded with had lost their primary medic to a knee injury 2 weeks in. Nothing combat-related, which made it somehow more frustrating. He had stepped wrong, coming off a helicopter, and torn his ACL, and that was it. He was done, medevaced back to Germany, before anyone had really processed that he was gone. The team's secondary medical training was solid but not deep. They needed Sloane up front in a way that had not been part of the original plan. She moved up. Of course she moved up. She was not the kind of person who stayed in the back when the people in the front needed what she had. And the team's 6 operators, all experienced, all competent, the kind of men who did not easily admit they needed anything from anyone, the team opened up for her in the way that combat units sometimes open up for the rare individual who manages to be simultaneously excellent at a hard job and genuinely present as a human being. They called her Doc, the universal honorific for corpsmen and medics who had earned it. They told her things they did not usually tell people, the way you tell things to someone who has seen you at your worst and treated you with respect anyway. She told them almost nothing about herself, not because she was hiding, or not entirely, but because Sloane Reeves had spent her whole life existing at the intersection of two things that did not fully make sense to most people together. Rifle and the medicine, the inherited precision of a man who had used his gift for war, and the chosen purpose of a woman who had decided to use hers for healing. And she had found that it was easier to let people know one side or the other, not both. They knew about the medicine. They did not know about the rifle. The night of the mission, 6 weeks into her deployment, she was crouched behind a low stone wall with a Marine named Castillo who had taken a through and through to the upper thigh and was losing blood in a way that required Sloane's full and immediate attention. "Stay still," she told him, pressing the wound with practiced hands, her voice completely steady. "I know it hurts. Stay still." "Is it bad?" Castillo asked. He was 22 years old and his voice had the careful, controlled quality of a man who has decided not to panic and is holding that decision together with both hands. "It missed the femoral," Sloane said. "You are going to keep your leg and you are going to be furious about the physical therapy. Stop moving." "That's not exactly a no." "Castillo, I swear to God." He stopped moving. The gunfire around them was continuous and close. Sloane could hear the distinctive crack of incoming rounds overhead, the snap that meant the bullet had passed near enough to create a pressure wave in the air. She had learned to tune this out with the same mechanism she used to tune out the beeping of monitors in a field hospital. It was present, she was aware of it, but it was not allowed to take up processing power that she needed elsewhere. What she could not tune out was what she heard in a break between bursts of fire. Two voices somewhere in the rubble to her left. One of them was cursing in a way that was not combat alertness, that was pain. The other was trying to respond and losing the ability to do it. Two more men down. She could not see them. "Hold pressure here," she told Castillo, guiding his hands to replace hers on the wound. "Do not let up. Do not move. Do you hear me? Doc, where are you?" 30 seconds, she said, and she was moving before she finished saying it. She found them in a collapsed section of wall that had come down when the initial strike hit the compound. Staff Sergeant Kevin Okafor was pinned under a concrete slab that had hit him across the lower back, and the sounds he was making were the sounds of a man whose body was providing extremely urgent feedback about the state of his spine. Corporal James Trevino beside him had caught shrapnel across the face and was blind in one eye with blood coming fast enough that the other eye was going to be compromised in the next 2 minutes if Sloane did not get pressure on it. "Okay," she said, dropping to her knees between them. "Okay, I am here." "Trevino, stop touching your face. Okafor, talk to me." "I can't feel my legs," Okafor said. The sentence landed like a stone in still water. Sloane kept her face completely neutral. This was the skill, the real skill that nobody put in a training manual, the ability to receive devastating information and not let it travel across your face to the patient who just delivered it. "All right," she said, "that tells me something. I'm going to start at your neck and work down. I need you to tell me if you feel anything. Anything at all. Can you do that?" "Yeah," Okafor said. His voice was steady. The man was extraordinary. "Yeah, I can do that." She worked fast. She got Trevino's eye packed and pressure wrapped in 90 seconds one-handed, while simultaneously running her other hand down Okafor's spine, reading the damage through her fingertips, the way her father had once taught her to read wind through the feel of air against skin. The slab had hit him at the L2 level, she thought. If she was right, it was bad, but not unsurvivable. If she was wrong in either direction, she was not going to be wrong. "Trevino, can you push that slab?" she said. "My hands are—" "I know, use your arms. I need 3 inches of clearance." Trevino, half-blinded, leaking blood through her field dressing, pushed. He got almost 2 inches. It was enough. Sloane got her hands under Okafor's torso and began the careful, agonizing process of moving a man with a spinal injury without doing the thing that would finish what the concrete had started. It took 4 minutes. It felt like 40. Okafor made sounds that Sloane blocked from processing and kept working. By the time she had him clear, she was sweating through her uniform and breathing hard, and there was blood on her hands that was not entirely hers. She got him stabilized. She got Trevino stable. She had started moving back to Castillo, and that was when the sniper opened up. The first round hit the ground 18 inches to her left. The second hit the stone she had just been crouched behind with a crack that she felt as much as heard. She dropped flat, and the third round passed through the exact space where her head had been 1 second earlier. She lay still. She mapped the angle of the shots in her mind. The sniper was elevated. Northwest, approximately 850 yards based on the time delay between the muzzle flash she had caught in her peripheral vision and the sound of impact. It was dark. It was windy. There was debris in the air that would affect trajectory in ways that were not entirely predictable. She knew all of this because her father had spent years teaching her all of this. She knew it the way she knew her own heartbeat. She also knew that the sniper's current position gave him a direct line to where Okafor and Trevino were lying. They could not move. She could not move them. The medevac that had been called was still 14 minutes out, and all that sniper had to do was take his time, and he could kill every one of them before it arrived. She pressed her face into the dirt and closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. She thought about her mother, about the bedroom, about the promise that she had kept for 11 years with a fidelity that she had been genuinely proud of. She thought about Okafor, who could not feel his legs, and Trevino, who could barely see, and Castillo, who was holding pressure on his own wound alone in the dark, and the 4 other members of this team, who were somewhere in this compound and did not yet know the angle of the gun that was hunting them. 3 seconds. Then she opened her eye. 8 feet to her right, 8 to her right in the rubble of the collapsed wall, she could see the barrel of a rifle. Not hers. She had never carried one by choice. This one had belonged to the team's point man, Martinez, who had been separated from them 20 minutes ago and was either in cover or already down, she did not know which. The rifle was a Remington 700 variant bolt-action scoped. She had shot exactly this configuration more times than she could count. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she said very quietly to no one in particular, "Dad, I'm sorry." And she moved. She moved low and fast, her body pressed against the rubble, every muscle in her trained to stay small, stay quiet, stay alive. The rifle was 8 feet away. It might as well have been 8 miles. The sniper had her position dialed in, and the moment she broke cover, he would have a clear shot. She knew this. She calculated it the same way she calculated dosages and trauma priorities with the same cold, methodical part of her brain that her father had called her gift and her mother had called her curse. She gave herself 3 seconds to think. Not more. The wind had shifted. She felt it against the left side of her face coming now from the southwest instead of the northwest, which meant the sniper would have to adjust his holdover. That adjustment would take him approximately 1 to 2 seconds. She had trained enough in crosswind conditions to know the math was unforgiving, and she had watched enough men underestimate wind shift to know they almost always adjusted too slow. She went on 2. Her hands closed around the rifle stock before her mind had fully registered that her body was already moving. She rolled onto her back behind a chunk of concrete that was barely wide enough to cover her shoulders, and she brought the scope up to her eye. 850 yards, northwest, elevated, dark, wind shifting southwest at approximately 12 knots. Her father's voice in her head, calm and instructional, the way it had always been when he was teaching. You don't rush the shot, Sloan. You settle into it. You breathe the world out. You find the stillness inside the noise. I'm trying, Dad, she said under her breath to no one. She found him. He was behind what had once been a wall on the second level of a structure that had partially survived the airstrike, and he was good. Genuinely good, the kind of trained patience that most people never developed. He was not moving. He was waiting her out, knowing that eventually someone would have to break cover, and he had the time and the darkness on his side. Except he did not know what he was waiting for. Her heartbeat was steady. She noticed this in a distant, observational way, the way you notice the temperature of a room you have been in long enough to stop feeling it. 11 years had passed since she made that promise, and in 11 years she had never once put a living person in a scope. But her body remembered everything her father had taught it, and her body did not appear to be interested in what her conscience was doing right now. She exhaled slowly. Halfway out, she found the stillness. She squeezed the trigger. The shot broke clean, 863 yards. She found out the exact distance later from the after-action report, because she could not stop herself from asking. 863 yards in the dark, with a shifting crosswind, with a rifle she had never fired before tonight, belonging to a man she had met 40 days ago. One shot, the sniper did not move again. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the silence before the shot. Before it had been the silence of danger holding its breath. After it was the silence of something that had been threatening to happen and had now happened, and everyone in the vicinity was catching up to the new reality. Kowalski's voice came over the radio first. Did somebody just was that one of ours? That was me, Sloan said. Her own voice sounded strange to her, flat, like it was coming from a room next to the one she was actually in. A pause, then Kowalski, with the careful tone of a man choosing his words precisely, Doc, where did you learn to shoot like that? Later, she said. Okafor needs a surgical consult and a spinal board the moment that medevac lands. Trevino has a compromised orbit on the left side. I need an ophthalmologist on standby. And somebody needs to get to Castillo because he has been holding his own wound for 11 minutes, and I do not know what his pressure looks like. Another pause. Shorter this time. Copy that, Kowalski said. She set the rifle down. She looked at her hands for exactly 1 second. Then she put them to work. What she did not know, yet what none of them knew, was that the shot had been witnessed, not by the enemy, by the overhead surveillance drone that the task force had running continuous overwatch on the operation. The footage was already being reviewed by the time the medevac helicopter touched down, and the man reviewing it was a lieutenant colonel named Harold Brennan, who had spent 15 years running special operations programs and who watched the clip 3 times before he said anything to the analyst sitting next to him. Run her file, Brennan said. Sir, the corpsman, Reeves, run her complete file, training, quals, family background, everything. The analyst pulled it up. He read for about 90 seconds. Then he said quietly, "Sir, her father was Dale Reeves." Brennan looked at the screen for a long moment. "Get me everything you have on Dale Reeves." None of this reached Sloan that night. She was busy. She was the kind of busy that leaves no space in your head for anything except the immediate problem, which was the way she preferred things, because the immediate problem was something she could control, and the alternative was thinking about what she had just done, and she was not ready for that yet. Okafor went out on the first medevac. He was conscious, which was both encouraging and painful to watch, because a conscious man who cannot feel his legs is a man who is doing real-time arithmetic on what his future looks like, and Okafor was smart enough to do that math fast. He grabbed Sloane's wrist as they were loading him. "Tell me straight," he said. "Am I going to walk?" She looked him in the eye. "I don't know yet, but you are going to live. That part I am certain of." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once and let go of her wrist, and they loaded him onto the helicopter. She watched it go. She did not let herself feel anything about it. She filed it in the place where she put things that she would need to feel later when later was possible. Trevino went on the second lift. He was quieter than Okafor, which worried her more. The quiet ones were sometimes the ones going into shock, and sometimes they were the ones who had already decided how they were going to feel about what happened to them and were done negotiating with the universe about it. Trevino was 19 years old. She found this out when she was filling out his casualty card and saw his date of birth. She wrote the numbers down, and then she wrote them down again because she thought she had made a mistake, and she had not. 19 years old. She put that one in the file too. Castillo was on the third lift. He had held pressure for 18 minutes by the time she got back to him, and his blood pressure was low but manageable, and he looked up at her when she knelt down beside him with the particular expression of a man who has survived something by stubbornness alone and knows it. "I heard one shot," he said. "One shot, Doc, 12 minutes after you left me, and the whole perimeter went quiet. Don't move your leg." "Was that you?" She did not answer him. "Sloan." He used her name, not her title, which was not something he had done before. "Was that shot yours?" She pressed 2 fingers to his wrist, checking his pulse with her eyes on her watch. 64 beats per minute. Better than she had expected. "Your pressure is coming up. That is good news." "Yeah," Castillo said. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not going to say anything." "There is nothing to say." "Right." He let her work for another minute, then, "For what it's worth, you saved 4 people tonight, including me. Whatever it cost you, and I can see in your face that it cost something, I think you should know that." She did not look up from his wound. "Keep still, Castillo." He kept still. The debrief happened at 0400 hours at the forward operating base, in a room that smelled like coffee and dry erase markers, with 6 men who all looked like they had slept approximately as much as she had, which was not at all. Garrett ran the session, which meant it was thorough and not particularly gentle, because Garrett's position was that a thorough debrief was the greatest act of respect you could offer to the people who had been in the field with you. He went through the timeline, he went through the casualties, he went through the tactical decisions, and then he reached the part of the timeline that everyone in the room had been waiting for, and he said, "Reeves, walk me through the sniper contact." The room got very still. Sloan had been sitting at the end of the table with her hands folded in front of her, and a cup of coffee she had not drunk. She looked at Garrett. He looked back at her with an expression that was entirely neutral, which she had already learned meant he was paying very close attention. "The sniper had a direct sightline to Okafor and Trevino," she said. "They were immobile. The medevac was 14 minutes out. I assessed that the sniper would neutralize them before extraction was possible if the threat was not addressed." "And you addressed it," Garrett said. "Yes, from 863 yards, in the dark, with a rifle that was not yours." "Yes." The room was silent for 4 seconds, which was a long time for a room full of people who were paid to process information quickly. "Doc." This was Kowalski leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "Because I have been on 12 combat deployments, and I have worked with some of the best shooters in the world, and what you did tonight. My father taught me," she said. She said it simply the way you state a fact that has no emotional content, which was a lie, but it was the lie she had available. "Who is your father?" Webb asked. He was the youngest in the room and the only one who asked questions that the older men had already decided not to ask because they had already calculated that it was not their business. "Dale Reeves," she said. The name landed differently in this room than it would have landed in most rooms. Garrett knew the name. She could see it in the very slight shift of his expression, the way something clicked behind his eyes. Kowalski knew it too. They looked at each other for just a fraction of a second, which was enough. "All right," Garrett said in the tone that meant the topic was closed. "Reeves, for the record, what you did tonight saved the lives of at least 3 members of this team. That goes in the report. What else goes in the report is above my pay grade and above yours, and we will deal with that when it becomes a conversation we are required to have. Right now you are off rotation for 72 hours. Get some sleep." She nodded. She stood. She was almost to the door when Garrett said her name and she stopped. Reeves, he paused. Are you all right? She thought about it honestly. It was the first time all night that she had given herself permission to ask herself the question. I don't know yet, she said. He nodded. That's an honest answer. She left. She did not sleep. She sat on the edge of her bunk in the gray pre-dawn light, and she held her hands in front of her face and she looked at them for a long time. They were her hands. She had used them for 6 years to keep people alive. She had used them to start IVs and pack wounds and set bones and talk terrified 20-year-olds through the worst moments of their lives. She had been proud of that. She had built an identity around it carefully and deliberately, the way you build a structure you intend to live in. And tonight she had used those same hands to kill someone. She did not know his name. She knew his position. She knew his skill level approximately. She knew that he had been trying to kill the people she was responsible for. She knew that her decision had been tactically correct, morally defensible, and objectively necessary given the circumstances. She also knew that none of that was going to feel like enough at 3 o'clock in the morning for a very long time. She thought about calling her mother. She picked up her phone twice and put it down twice. There was no version of that conversation that she could have tonight. There was no way to explain what. She put the phone in her pocket and lay back on the bunk with her eyes open, and she did what she had trained herself to do when sleep was not available and the mind would not stop moving. She went through the night in sequence clinically the way a surgeon reviews a procedure looking for errors. Not emotional errors, technical ones, because the emotional review was going to happen whether she wanted it or not, and it was going to be brutal, and she was not going to be able to stop it. But she could at least postpone it until she was somewhere that being flattened by it would not get anyone killed. Okafor, Trevino, Castillo, the IV, the airway, the wound packing. The sequence of decisions each one made in the compressed time of combat where you did not get to deliberate and you did not get to second guess, and you did not get to be afraid until after. She replayed them all and found nothing she would change. That was something. It was not enough, but it was something. She fell asleep sometime around 5:30 with her boots still on and her hands folded over her stomach, and she slept for 4 hours without dreaming, which was the most merciful thing her body had done for her in weeks. She woke up to Webb standing in the doorway of the bunk room, looking like he had been standing there for a minute, already trying to decide whether to knock on the open door or just wait. Webb, she said without opening her eyes fully. Whatever it is too early. It's 9:15, he said. It's too early. Ma'am? He only called her that when he was genuinely uncomfortable about something, and he was genuinely uncomfortable about something. Now she could hear it under the word. Colonel Brennan is here. He's asking for you specifically. Garrett's with him. They're in the command room. She opened her eyes. Brennan, she repeated. Harold Brennan. Yes, ma'am. She sat up. She ran a hand over her face. She had not had time to wonder how far the footage from last night had traveled, but she understood now that the answer was further and faster than she would have preferred. Give me 3 minutes, she said. She gave herself 2. The command room was a rectangular space with a table that was too large for the number of people usually in it. Today it held exactly 3 people when she walked in, Garrett sitting at the far end with his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Brennan standing near the head of the table with his hands clasped behind his back in the posture of a man who had made a decision before the meeting started. And an analyst she did not recognize. A young woman with short hair and a laptop and the careful look of someone who had been told to observe and not speak. Petty Officer Reeves, Brennan said. He did not say it warmly. He said it the way you say a name when you have been studying a file attached to it, and the file has surprised you. Sir, Sloan said. She stood at ease without being told to. Sit down. She sat. She glanced once at Garrett. He looked back at her with the neutral expression that she was beginning to understand was his way of saying, I cannot help you with what's coming, but I am here. Brennan sat. He folded his hands on the table and looked at her directly. I watched the drone footage from last night 11 times, he said. I want to be clear about what I saw. I saw a Navy Fleet Marine Force corpsman under direct enemy fire provide trauma care to 3 casualties simultaneously while managing her own safety, and then engage and neutralize a trained enemy sniper at 863 yards with a single round from an unfamiliar weapon. Is there anything about that summary that is inaccurate? No, sir. Your official designation on this deployment is medical support. You are not cleared for direct action. No, sir. So from a paperwork standpoint, last night is complicated. Sloan said nothing. She had learned that there were moments where speaking filled a silence that was better left open. Brennan studied her for a moment. Then he said, Tell me about your father. The shift in direction was deliberate, she knew. It was the kind of conversational move that experienced interrogators and experienced commanders both used for the same reason, to see how someone handled being surprised. She kept her face level. What would you like to know, sir? How long did he train you? From the time I was 8, seriously from about 12. What was the maximum distance you achieved in training? 1,400 meters in competition. In the field, I haven't had occasion to. She stopped. Before last night. Brennan nodded slowly. He picked up a pen, set it down, picked it up again. It was the only sign she had seen that he was working through something. Your father's service record is extraordinary. His assessment scores coming out of Scout Sniper School were the highest in his class year. His confirmed engagements in theater. He paused. He never told you about any of that. It was not a question. He told me about the craft, she said. He did not tell me about the applications. But you understood. I understood enough to make a promise to my mother that I would not use it the way he had. Brennan was quiet for a moment. Across the table, Garrett had not moved. And last night, Brennan asked, last night I had 3 immobile casualties and a sniper with a direct sight line and 14 minutes until medevac. I made a decision. She looked at him steadily. I would make the same decision again. I know, Brennan said, and the way he said it told her that this was not a disciplinary conversation. It was something else, and she was only now beginning to understand the shape of it. He opened the folder in front of him. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table to her. This is a preliminary assessment request. I want to formally evaluate you for a joint program we have been developing for 14 months. I cannot tell you the specifics of the program in this room at this level of clearance, but I can tell you that it combines 2 capabilities that we have historically siloed and that siloing them has cost lives. He paused. Your specific combination of skills is either extremely rare or extremely well hidden, and based on last night, I believe it is both. Sloan looked at the paper. She did not pick it up. Sir, she said carefully, I am a medic. That is not a cover story or a secondary identity. That is what I chose. Last night was... She stopped, started again. Last night was a situation where the medical calculus required a solution that I happen to have access to. That does not mean I am volunteering to be something different from what I am. I'm not asking you to be something different, Brennan said. I'm asking you to stop pretending that what you are is only half of what it actually is. The room was very quiet. Garrett spoke for the first time since she had walked in. His voice was measured the way it always was, but there was something underneath it. Reeves, nobody in this room is trying to take away what you built. Your record as a corpsman is exceptional. 7 deployments, 3 commendations. The work you did last night on Okafor and Trevino alone, he paused. Okafor is out of surgery. They are saying he has a 60% chance of recovering function in both legs. That is because of the way you moved him. The surgical team said if you had done it 2 degrees differently in either direction, that percentage goes to 0. She absorbed this, 60%. She filed it. She would need to feel it later. The point, Garrett continued, is that nobody here is reducing you to the shot. But we are also not going to pretend it did not happen, or that it happened by accident, or that someone with your particular set of skills in the same body does not represent something that we have an obligation to think carefully about. She looked at the paper again. She did not pick it up. What does the program actually require of me? That is a conversation for a different room and a higher clearance level, Brennan said. Then I am not signing anything today. Brennan looked at her for a long moment. Then for the first time, something in his expression shifted, not quite a smile, but the nearest thing to one she had seen from him. Fair enough, he said. He slid the paper back to his side of the table. You have 72 hours of stand down. Use them. We will talk again before you rotate back. She stood. She was almost to the door again. She seemed to keep almost getting out of rooms today when Brennan said, Reeves, for what it is worth, what you did last night, the whole of it, was one of the finest pieces of work I have seen in 23 years of running operations. You should know that. She nodded once without turning around. Then she walked out. The 72 hours were not restful. She spent most of this first day in the medical bay because standing down from the field did not mean standing down from sick call, and there was a steady stream of minor injuries and infections and the particular brand of psychological unwellness that accumulated in bodies that had been under sustained stress for too long. She treated all of it with the same thorough attention she always gave. And if the men she treated noticed that she was slightly quieter than usual, slightly more internal, they were respectful enough not to comment. What she was doing in the space behind her eyes while her hands did their work was thinking about her father. Not the version of her father who had sat across from her at the dinner table and talked about windage and patience and the ethics of the craft, the other version. The one she had glimpsed occasionally in the way he went quiet sometimes, the way a conversation could be going perfectly normally, and then something, a sound, a particular quality of light, a phrase someone used would reach into him and pull something back to the surface, and he would not say anything. He would just go to whatever room he could be alone in and be alone in it for a while, and then he would come back and he would be fine, or the version of fine that had become his default, and they would continue. She had spent a lot of years not asking about that. Out of love, she had told herself, out of respect for his privacy. But she understood now, sitting with her own version of last night, that there was another reason she had not asked. She had not asked because she had not wanted to know what it felt like. Because knowing what it felt like was admitting that it was something she might one day need to understand from the inside. She understood now. From the inside. On the morning of the second day, she called her mother. She had been awake since 4. She sat on the ground with her back against the outer wall of the medical bay, the pre-dawn cold in the air, sharp enough to be clarifying, and she dialed. It rang 4 times, which was normal, because Maggie Reeves was 61 years old and kept her phone in a different room from wherever she was and moved toward it at her own pace, unhurried, because she had never in her life been ruled by anything that demanded immediate attention. "Baby?" Maggie said when she picked up. Just that, one word, and the warmth in it was so complete and so familiar that Sloan felt something shift in her chest that she was not prepared for. "Hey, Mom. You sound tired." "I'm okay." "That's not what I said, Iana." Sloan pressed her lips together. She looked up at the sky, which was the particular dark blue of just before dawn, and she said, "Mom, I need to tell you something. And I need you to just listen for a minute before you say anything. Can you do that?" A pause. "You're scaring me, Sloan." "I'm not hurt. I'm fine. Everyone on my team is alive." She paused. "But something happened, and I need you to know about it. Mom, I broke my promise." The silence that followed was the longest of the entire conversation. Sloan could hear her mother breathing. She could almost hear her mother thinking, which was a thing Sloan had always been able to do, had always found remarkable, that she knew her mother's thought patterns so well, she could track them from halfway around the world through a satellite phone. "Tell me," Maggie said finally. Her voice was very quiet. Sloan told her. Not all of it, not the classified parts, not the names and locations that she was not able to share, but the shape of it, the casualties she had been managing, the sniper, the 14 minutes, the rifle that had not been hers, and the shot that had been hers entirely. She told it in sequence, the way she told everything, without the drama that she did not need to add, because the facts were dramatic enough on their own. When she finished, Maggie was quiet for a while, long enough that Sloan said, "Mom, I'm here." Another pause. "Are you all right?" "I don't know yet." "That's honest." A breath. "How does it feel?" Sloan thought about it, really thought about it for the first time without flinching. "Like I did the right thing," she said slowly, "and like doing the right thing costs exactly as much as you said it would. Both of those things at the same time." "Yes," Maggie said softly. "That is exactly what your father said the first time he talked to me about it. 28 years ago. Those were almost his exact words." Sloan closed her eyes. "He is not going to be angry at you," Maggie said. "I want you to know that." "Are you?" A long pause, the longest yet. And then Maggie said, "No, I'm not angry. I don't." "Sloan, you saved those men's lives. You saved them with medicine, and then you saved them again with a rifle. And if I am being completely honest with myself, which is something I try to be, I don't think I have the right to put my fear above the lives of those men." Her voice broke slightly on the last few words, just slightly, just enough to hear. I wanted so much for you not to have to carry what he carries." "I know, Mom. And now you will." "I know." They were both quiet for a moment. Then Maggie said, "Sloan, you are your father's daughter in every way. I have always known that. I made that promise with you because I was afraid, and fear is not always wisdom, and I think I owe you an apology for not knowing the difference." Sloan opened her eyes. The sky had shifted from dark blue to the particular gray pink of the earliest edge of morning. "You don't owe me an apology, Mom." "Let me decide what I owe," Maggie said, with a firmness that was so entirely her that Sloan almost laughed. Almost. "Okay," Sloan said. "Come home safe," Maggie said. "That is the only promise I need from you now. Come home safe. Everything else we will figure out at the table." "Okay, Mom. I love you, baby." "I love you too." She sat with the phone in her hand for a while after the call ended, watching the sky go from gray pink to something approaching daylight. She felt lighter than she had since the night of the mission, and she tried to understand why, because the facts of what she had done had not changed, and the weight of those facts had not changed either. What had changed was that she had said it out loud to the one person whose judgment she feared most, and the sky had not fallen. Her mother had heard the thing that Sloan had been most afraid for her to hear, and had come back with love and honesty and the particular brand of complicated grace that long lives generate in certain people. And that, it turned out, was the thing she had most needed. She was still sitting there when Webb came around the corner with 2 cups of coffee and the expression of a man who had been looking for her for long enough to be mildly relieved, but not long enough to be actually worried. "Thought you might be out here," he said. He offered her one of the cups. She took it. "You thought I would be sitting on the ground against the wall in the cold before sunrise. After the last 2 days, he sat down beside her without being invited, which was either very presumptuous or very comfortable, and she was not sure yet which. "Yeah, honestly, that tracks." She looked at him sideways. "How long have you been in? 6 years. And you're 24 at 25 last week." She shook her head slightly. He was older than she had been thinking he was, which recalibrated something. He was not as much a kid as she had been treating him. "Happy belated," she said. "Thanks." He wrapped both hands around his cup. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Last night, when you made that shot, he paused, looking for the right phrasing. How did you, with the wind and the dark and a rifle you'd never fired, how do you even begin to? You don't think about it, she said. That's the answer. Thinking about it is what makes it impossible. You do what your training put into your body, and you let your body do its and you get out of the way of yourself. Huh. He thought about it. That's kind of the same as medicine, isn't it? She looked at him. He was looking into his coffee cup, not at her, so he did not see her expression shift. Yeah, she said, it is kind of exactly the same. He nodded as if this had confirmed something he had already suspected. For what it's worth, he said, I told Garrett this morning, and I'll tell you now, I don't know what I would have done in your position. With the rifle, with the choice, I'd like to think I'd have done the right thing, but I genuinely don't know. He looked up at her. You knew, and you did it anyway. That's not nothing. She looked back at him steadily. It costs something. Yeah, Webb said. The things worth doing usually do. They sat in silence for a few minutes, drinking bad coffee in the early morning cold of a forward operating base in Afghanistan. And it was one of those moments that does not seem significant while it is happening, but that you remember for the rest of your life the specific feeling of being genuinely known by another person at the exact moment you needed it most. She did not know yet that in 4 hours she would be back on a mission. She did not know that the intelligence Brennan had been reviewing was not only about her, that the compound they had struck 2 nights ago had been one node in a network, and the network was still active, and there was a window of approximately 6 hours during which that window could be closed if the right team moved immediately. She did not know that Garrett was in the command room right now looking at a mission brief and at the roster of available operators and at the specific set of skills required for what needed to happen, and that her name was the one he kept coming back to. She did not know any of this yet. What she knew was that the coffee was terrible, and the sky was now fully light, and Webb was not as young as she had thought, and her mother did not hate her, and Okafor had a 60% chance of walking again. She held on to all of that. She let herself feel all of it, the gratitude and the grief.